Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. In today's video, I am going to be discussing Derrick Rose being traded from the Detroit Pistons to the New York Knicks. For the Knicks, I think that this trade is very indicative of how they view themselves as a franchise. So far this season, they have been sitting at the bottom part of the Eastern Conference playoff picture, and it looks like they have a pretty decent shot at finishing in the play-in tournament. I think that adding Derrick Rose is a pretty solid upgrade to their roster. One of the biggest issues with this team is their over-reliance on Julius Randle to create shots for his teammates. He has been forced to step into a large role as a playmaker, and that's not really an area where he has excelled in years past. He's been much improved and has actually done a pretty nice job in that role so far for the Knicks, but having a guy like Derrick Rose who can take a lot of pressure off of him is certainly going to affect him positively. The way that it will affect a lot of the other Knicks guards might not be so positive. I think that this probably means a significant decrease in minutes for Austin Rivers and Alec Burks, two players who have been playing minutes in the 20s on average, who can really score a lot of points for you off the bench and not do a whole lot else. And with Derrick Rose, he can score a lot of points for you off the bench while also being a positive playmaker. So far this season, he's averaged 14 points and 4 assists per game while shooting 42% from the field, 33% from 3, and 84% from the free throw line. That's Derrick Rose that I'm talking about. And that probably makes him like the third or fourth best player on this Knicks team right away. Elfrid Payton is the incumbent starter for the Knicks, and I think that if I had to make a bet, he'll probably keep his job as the starter. Derrick Rose was coming off the bench for Detroit, and that wasn't because they viewed him as the second best guard on their team. It was because there's a lot of injury risk, and having him come off the bench limits how many minutes he actually ends up playing. So if I had to guess, I would say that Payton will keep his starting job. However, I do think that his minutes will probably decline. He's been playing about 28 minutes per game so far. I think that'll probably duck down into like the 22 to 25 minutes per game range. Payton is probably the best defensive guard on this Knicks team, although he hasn't been as good on that end of the court as he has been in the past so far this season, and he has really struggled to shoot the ball with any sort of efficiency. I think he still gets out there because of his defense, but it's definitely going to be a hit to his minutes. Hopefully this doesn't mean too big of a minutes decrease for Immanuel Quickley, who I think has genuinely been one of the 4 or 5 best rookies in the entire league to start off this season. Coming in, I had him in the mid-30s on my draft board, so I thought that it was a bit of a reach when the Knicks took him at 25. The reason why I didn't have him as a first-round pick was because I questioned whether or not he'd truly be able to play the point guard position in the NBA, because I didn't view him as being a great playmaker, but he's at least been competent in that area of the game to start off his career this year, and his ability to shoot the ball from 3 and his magnificent floater shot have been able to make up for that slight lack of playmaking. So far this year, he's been able to average 12.4 points per game and 2.7 assists per game in just 19 minutes while shooting 41% from the field, 37% from 3, and 92% from the free throw line. That is magnificent shooting, and that's for a rookie. So I think that Quickley is still deserving of pretty solid minutes at either guard position. I'd say that getting around 20 minutes is probably a pretty good spot for him, and I'm sure that there are a lot of Knicks fans who would argue that he should get a few more minutes. I think that he's someone that could very easily play alongside Derrick Rose. His ability to space the floor should complement Rose's ability as an excellent driver and passer. And I think that those two guys also complement each other defensively, where Quickley's plus wingspan should be able to cover up for some of Rose's lackings on that end of the court. When it comes to Alec Burks and Austin Rivers, those are the two guys that I really think are going to have to lose a lot of minutes. They are both pretty similar to Rose in a lot of ways. And I think that Rose is probably the best player out of those three. As a matter of fact, I think that Rivers is probably a pretty expendable guy for the Knicks at this point, and his non-guaranteed contract could be very intriguing to a contending team. So it would not surprise me whatsoever to see a playoff caliber team try to make a move for Austin Rivers, because as we saw last year with the Rockets, he is capable of making a shot for your team off the bench. I wouldn't say that it's a guarantee that he gets traded, but I certainly do think that there is a chance that he could be on the move as a bit of a domino effect after this Derrick Rose trade. The player that I think that this probably affects most negatively, though, has to be RJ Barrett. And it's not because Barrett is going to be losing minutes or touches because of Rose. Actually, as a matter of fact, he may lose some touches. So far this year, RJ has averaged 17 points on 43% shooting from the field, although just 28% from the three-point line. His game is mostly as a slasher who can attack the rim at a high level. And adding Derrick Rose, who is a pretty poor three-point shooter, onto this team certainly doesn't help them in that aspect of the game. And it's going to hurt the spacing that they have, which really limits how much RJ is able to get to the rim. I hope that Rose continues to improve from the three-point line, and so far this season he's actually been decent, shooting 33% on about 4 attempts per game, but in the past he's been a sub 30% shooter from beyond the arc, so that's definitely a cause for concern if you are a Knicks fan. However, he is a well-experienced player, and he should be able to mentor these young guys like Quickly and Barrett and hopefully show them a bit of the ropes as it comes to the NBA game. Overall, for the Knicks, I think that this is a pretty solid trade. It definitely makes their roster better as they give up a player who is in the G League and bring in a guy who is genuinely a positive impact player. However, I do think that it hurts some of their young players' development in the long term, so that definitely takes away from their grade. However, the fact that they added a player as good as Derrick Rose while giving up just a mid-tier second-round pick and a player who wasn't part of their long-term plans anyways, I still think that this is a really good trade for the Knicks, and I give them an A-. Moving on to the Pistons, there's much less to say about this team, but they did make a interesting move here as they added Dennis Smith Jr., which is really just taking a stab at a player who has shown some promise in the past, posting seasons where he's averaged 14 plus point per game averages on 2 occasions, but has never been efficient from the field, has never been a positive passer, and is also a minus defensively. If he can figure out how to make shots once again, then there's certainly some value with Dennis Smith Jr., and I'm not exactly sure that you're going to have a hard time retaining him following this season if the Pistons do decide that he's the guy that they want to keep around long term. I don't think that they'll pick up the $7.7 million qualifying offer on him after the season, but if they could agree to a minimum deal for the next 2 seasons, that would make some sense to me. They also did add that Charlotte second-round pick for this season. If I had to stare into my crystal ball and predict where that's going to land, I'd say it'll probably be somewhere between the 38th pick in the draft and the 45th pick. So they're adding that to what is already going to be a terrific first-round pick that they own themselves, as well as Toronto's second-round pick, which will probably land somewhere in the late 40s to early 50s. So they have 2 seconds and 1 first in this draft, and they could probably use those 2 seconds either to acquire a future second or to move up and make a selection somewhere in the early part of the second round. So I don't really love this trade for the Pistons, if I'm being quite frank with you. They got the Charlotte second round pick, which is solid, but the Knicks owned the Pistons' own second round pick from a prior deal, and I think that they should have really tried to get that pick back, as I think there's a pretty strong chance that that will be in the top 33, so you're essentially acquiring another first round pick. The Dennis Smith Jr., acquisition also doesn't make me too excited. The Knicks have other young players like the defensive-minded Frank Ntilikina and the suddenly sharpshooting Kevin Knox, who would have intrigued me more than DSJ, and I think that the Pistons either should have tried to get the 31st pick back or one of those two young players. However, they did take advantage by moving on from a veteran player on an expiring contract, so you can't dock too many points from them. So in the end, I'm giving the Pistons a C- for this trade. Let me know what you thought of this trade in the comment section down below. Are you with me on who I thought won? I gave the Knicks, I think I gave them an A-, and I gave the Pistons a C-. So I'm clearly in the boat that the Knicks won this trade, but perhaps you have a different idea. Let me know. Leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. That will be it for me, ladies and gentlemen. I will see you all again very soon.